For the next several minutes, we'll review the Standard Response Protocol. This material is based on the standards established by the I Love You Guys Foundation. Schools across the country use this standard to consistently communicate and respond to critical incidents. The Standard Response Protocol, also known as the SRP, is the emergency response standard followed by all schools in our district. The SRP is only effective if staff and students know and understand the basic expectations of what to do in an emergency. Using common terminology allows staff, students, volunteers, and law enforcement to respond to emergencies in an organized and coordinated manner. Using the SRP as a framework, the school's emergency response program has been developed as a coordinated effort between the school district and all local law enforcement agencies. It is also imperative that school staff and parents have a thorough understanding of these procedures. Effective communication is the key to relaying clear information through the proper channels during an emergency. When personnel and students understand expectations, anxiety and confusion are minimized. The SRP is based on 5 core actions: secure, lockdown, evacuate, shelter, and hold. When announced, every action must include specific instructions, followed by a directive. For example, should a school require a secure, the PA announcement would be secure the perimeter. During a lockdown, lockdown, locks, lights, out of sight. In an evacuation, where their fire alarm is not sounding, evacuate to a stated location. During a shelter, then instruct how to shelter based on the hazard. And in the event of a hold, remain in your classroom. Always repeat the action and the directive when announcing over the PA system. A secure, formerly called a lockout, is used when there is a threat outside of the building. A secure is typically enacted by law enforcement or district personnel, although it is an administrator's prerogative to call a secure whenever they feel it is warranted. Threats can take many forms. It might be a police or criminal activity in the area, something as simple as a dangerous animal on the campus or near the building, or civil unrest. When a secure is called, staff will ensure all outside doors are secured and locked. No one should be permitted to enter or exit the building until the secure has concluded. Students and school personnel must be brought inside the building. Personnel must be familiar with the school's incident command structure in order to effectively gather all students inside who are on the building's grounds. Teachers should take roll and report any missing or extra students to the front office. It is a good practice to document the time attendance was taken. Long before an actual school emergency, school personnel must have a clear understanding of how and with whom they should communicate before, during, and after a secure, lockdown, evacuation, shelter in place, or hold is announced. Once inside the building, with some exceptions, school business should be conducted as usual. Neither staff nor students should be allowed outside until the secure is released. This is true even if the secure lasts into recess, lunchtime, or after the conclusion of a typical school day. Sometimes, but not always, law enforcement will provide a presence to facilitate dismissal and pickup. Depending on the duration and severity of the precipitating incident, it's possible that students who would typically walk to school will require a parent or guardian to come pick them up. This is called reunification and will be addressed in a different training. The goals of a secure are to ensure the safety of staff and students by gathering all inside the building, then securing the building by locking all exterior doors. If your school has a preschool or other outbuilding on or near your campus, the public information officer at your school should be assigned to contact a designee at that building if an emergency situation arises. While in most cases it will be business as usual inside the school during a secure, in some cases a secure may transition into a lockdown, particularly if the threat gets too close to the school. Next, let's look at lockdowns. There is often confusion between a lockout and a lockdown. For this reason, the terminology was recently changed from lockout to secure. A secure is when a threat is identified outside of the building. Lockdowns are announced when there is a threat inside of the building. A lockdown may also be called when a threat may imminently approach or get near the building. After securing the perimeter, conduct business as usual during a secure. Lockdowns, on the other hand, are locks, lights, out of sight. People most commonly associate lockdowns with active shooter events, but it can be used in other situations like trespassers, angry parents, or suspicious persons inside of the building as well. Persons who are outside of the building when a lockdown is called should not attempt to re-enter the building. Rather, they should evacuate to a safe location or a rally point. If there are no school personnel nearby, students should either get behind a locked door or evacuate from the grounds if the threat is not in their immediate vicinity. The grounds at some schools, particularly elementaries, are locked and closed by design. In these circumstances, when persons are unable to escape the grounds, staff and students should find a location out of the way and shelter there until instructed to do otherwise. If you are in a classroom when a lockdown begins, remember, locks, lights, out of sight. Depending on the proximity of the threat, it might be appropriate to sweep the hallway for staff or students. Either way, in a lockdown, the employee will lock the door, turn off the lights, and obstruct the interior window, and have everyone in the room move to a location out of sight that cannot be seen from interior windows. As lockdowns may last several hours, teachers should do the best they can to maintain order in their classrooms. Instruct students to not move around the room, stay low to the ground, and to remain silent. Students are not prohibited from mobile phone use. In fact, following the initial stages of a lockdown, students should be encouraged to notify their parents that they're okay. It is possible that a lockdown will be announced before school, after school, during a transition period, or during lunchtime. If staff or students are in a hallway, depending on the proximity of the threat, the choice should be made to either evacuate the building or get into a classroom that can be locked down. When staff and students lock down behind a locked door, attendance should be taken of all persons present. Note the time and if anyone is missing, or if you have any extra students and staff members. If possible, these names should be shared with the designated person at the school. Communications procedures should be established long before an incident actually occurs. The most common methods of communication between teachers and incident command at the school is via two-way radios or text messaging. The practice of sliding cards or lists beneath classroom doors is inappropriate. Questions regarding the correct brand and model of a district radio, as well as getting them programmed to the correct frequency, should be directed to the District Technology Department. School rosters are available and can be accessed offline. Before an incident, designated school personnel should request and be familiar with how to access offline roles. This ensures we can access accurate information in the event that internet access is unavailable during an emergency. Persons taking roll should take note of who is missing and relay that information to either their group leader or the operations officer, depending on how their school's incident command is structured. Locked doors are proven time barriers. In active violence events, rarely, if ever, has someone been hurt who is behind a locked classroom door. Be absolutely silent. Phones should be silenced during the initial stages of a lockdown. Once a door has been closed and locked, it should not be opened for anyone. Administrators or law enforcement will unlock the door and release the room. A locked classroom door is a proven lifesaver. Now, usually, there's no need to raise or lower the exterior shades during a lockdown because the threat is already inside the building. The goal is to get out of sight behind a locked door as quickly as possible. If your classroom has two doors with corridor windows, make a plan before the incident on how you will make sure both sets of windows are obstructed. Be silent and maintain student silence. Likewise, mobile phones should be silenced or turned off. If you are with younger students, it may be appropriate to quietly read something to them. A lockdown cannot be ended with a PA announcement. It only ends when the administration or police open the door. If you can, take attendance. If the fire alarm sounds during a lockdown, stay in your classroom. If you must evacuate due to fire or smoke, the hallway may not be your best option. Consider using an alternate door, window, or any other exterior exit. Now let's talk about evacuation. Evacuation is how to move students in an orderly fashion from point A to point B.
A fire drill is really an evacuation. The PA announcement should state, "Evacuate," out of the building. With the SRP, evacuate is always followed by a location. For example, evacuate to the football field.
During an evacuation, with rare exception, students should leave their belongings behind. While students should not take their belongings, teachers should grab the go bag, if they have one, and bring it with them to the evacuation site.
Staff and students should be flexible and willing to listen to any new directions. For example, there may be cases where teachers lead students, and there may be cases when staff follow their students out.
Long before evacuation proceedings, schools shall establish a secondary evacuation location that is further away from the school. This is done in the event that the primary evacuation point is somehow compromised. Examples of compromised evacuation points include flooding, fire, smoke, or other physical dangers.
In a police-led evacuation, it is likely you will be asked to lead your students. When you reach the evacuation area, take attendance and note the time. If your phone is in your pocket, bring it. If it is in your purse or your backpack, you may not be given the opportunity to grab it. Before an evacuation, staff should have a plan on how to get a wheelchair-bound staff or student out of the building if they are not on the first floor and the elevator is unavailable. Resources like med sleds should be made available. A staff member should be trained on the sled's location and use and assigned to assist in the event of an emergency. If no such sled is available, it may be possible that a staff member or members will be asked to help carry a student down the stairs.
During an active assailant event, another option is self-evacuation. This might be done through a main exit or a secondary exit, such as an exterior classroom door or window. During an active assailant, extreme caution should be exercised when using main hallways for self-evacuation.
When law enforcement begins the main evacuation, here's what you should expect. An officer will unlock your door and enter your room. Stay where you are. The officer will give you specific instructions that you must follow. Don't be surprised if the officers are loud or demanding. Law enforcement officers are trained that hands can hold dangerous things. They might want to see your hands. They may even instruct you to evacuate hand to hand or with your hands on your head. At some point during the evacuation, officers might want to verify that students are at no further risk. They may search students and staff for other dangerous items.
Unless instructed otherwise, students should be quiet and walk, not run. Follow the instructions of law enforcement during evacuation. Their instruction may be verbal or via hand signals. Staff and students should ensure that their hands are visible. Never pick up a weapon that an active assailant may have dropped. In most circumstances, purses, briefcases, or backpacks must be left behind.
Teachers should bring their attendance notes, and once they've arrived at the evacuation assembly area, take attendance again. If attendance was taken before evacuation, the notes should be compared against the students present at the assembly area.
Now let's talk about shelter.
A shelter in place may be called for many reasons. Hazards involving shelter could be environmental, like a flood or an earthquake, or it could be a gas leak or a chemical spill nearby. The safety strategy depends upon the appropriate response to the given hazard.
The public address should simply state and repeat the hazard and the safety strategy. For example, the command for a flood warning would be flood, shelter in your designated safe areas. Flood, shelter in your designated safe areas.
In an earthquake, the strategy is to drop, cover, and hold. As emergencies can be especially dynamic, it is especially important during a shelter situation that staff and students listen intently to the instructions provided over the PA system.
As with other actions during a shelter event, staff should make efforts to take attendance and note the time when possible.
The final but no less important component of the SRP is called hold.
Holding in a classroom is announced when a situation would be best addressed by keeping corridors clear for students.
Examples could be a medical emergency or a student disruption. Staff and students who are in a hallway when a hold is called should be quickly ushered into their assigned classrooms. Otherwise, students and teachers should remain in their classrooms until the all clear is announced. Teachers should also close and lock the door. Unlike a lockdown, the door may be opened if necessary to permit a student who needs to get out of the corridor.
The teacher should also continue teaching, or if the lesson for the day is complete, offer the time to read or study. Bear in mind, Classes should not be dismissed until the hold has been lifted. The hold shall remain in effect and hallways should be kept clear until a PA announcement releases it.
If a fire alarm is sounded, it is completely appropriate to perform a hold for up to 60 seconds before evacuating.
During the momentary hold, teachers should listen to hear if the sound of yelling, screaming, fighting, or gunfire is coming from the hallway before evacuating. There are documented instances of active assailants activating a fire alarm to draw students and staff from the safety of their classrooms in order to do harm.
If the staff member does hear sounds coming from the hallway that make them concerned for the safety of their students, it is their prerogative to remain in the classroom. Otherwise, it is always the expectation that when a fire alarm sounds, all staff and students evacuate the building.
Be advised, the hold standard applies even if the school is already in a lockdown. If the fire alarm sounds when staff and students are locked down and sheltering out of sight, staff are advised to remain in place unless there is credible reason to believe that there is indeed a fire, and it would be a safer course of action to evacuate rather than to remain in the classroom. Ultimately, in the unlikely event that a fire alarm sounds during a lockdown, the choice to evacuate will be left up to the staff member's discretion. Remember that the main actions for the SRP are secure, lockdown, evacuate, shelter, and hold. Please note the vocabulary used in this program is shared between students, staff, and law enforcement and should not be changed or adjusted to fit the specific needs of a school. Additionally, each classroom in our schools has been provided with a copy of the emergency response flip chart. This resource contains the broad points of how to respond to the emergencies that may be encountered during the course of your employment with the school district and should be used as a reference as needed.
Questions regarding the contents of this training presentation should be directed to your school administrator or the district risk manager.